Professor Malat with your week 3 overview. This week's question is, what makes people happy? So in the previous couple of weeks, we've kind of looked at the historical and philosophical aspects of happiness. With the first question, what is happiness? Kind of trying to figure out what happiness means to us, and figuring out some kind of definition of happiness. And we kind of also looked at the rhetoric of happiness. That was one of my mini lectures from last week, where we have kind of examined how a culture's language can often affect how people perceive or feel happiness, that it's very related to how we use the language when we are talking about happiness. So this week we're kind of taking a little bit of a shift. We're looking now more from a psychological lens and figuring out what makes people happy. In addition to that, we're going to be learning more about the rhetorical analysis in preparation for that rhetorical analysis project that's due at the end of February. You have a draft due in week 6, and that final revision of the project due in week 7, and then we are going to switch into our research unit. So this week, you will apply what you've learned about rhetoric in the journal assignment and discussion board. They ask you to compare transcripts of a speech to a video of excerpts from the speech. We'll also look at a couple of different mediums just to give you an idea of the different types of things, the different types of quote unquote texts that you can use to analyze for this project. And in those assignments, you'll be evaluating the effectiveness of that different media. So the objectives this week is to identify the basics of rhetorical analysis, reflect upon rhetoric in everyday communication, analyze rhetorical effectiveness of a given text, summarize information from a text, compare and contrast multimodal text, that is, using not only speech and sound and words, it's a whole bunch of stuff, right? Multimodal, many modes. And make use, of course, of MLA formatting style and citation if necessary. So let's take a look at this week's readings. We have a couple of pages from the University of Mississippi Rhet Lab. The first is, what is analysis? So unlike the analysis that you probably did in your high school classes, where you read some short stories, poetry, other works of literature, and you had to do a literary analysis, figuring out things like symbolism and theme and, all of those various literary terms that we use. In this class, we don't do that. We are not looking at literature. I mean, we might read some literature, but we're not picking it apart to find out all of those various literary things that happen within a text. Instead, we are examining a text, right? We are really looking at it, and we're judging it on how that writer or speaker uses language and why they used it, right? So if you can think that rhetoric, again, is using language in a particular way to persuade a particular audience, then you're going to go a long way, and it will be a lot easier to understand the goal of this type of an analysis. So just read through this page, and then the next page is rhetorical analysis. So this gives a broad overview of analysis, what you do in an analysis, and then we look at rhetorical analysis. And this explains a bit about what is done in a rhetorical analysis. You also have an opportunity to test your knowledge with a little bit of practice at the end of that, should you choose to do that. So those are the 2 readings from the University of Mississippi Rhet Lab. And then we have a Canvas page. I found this information, where did I find it? At BYU. Brigham Young University has a Creative Commons page, so I just lifted that from there and put it into Canvas for all of you. But these are some helpful questions when you're approaching a rhetorical analysis. So you want to think about what the rhetorical situation is. What occasion gives rise to the need or opportunity for persuasion? And what is the historical occasion? What is the kairos that's involved, right? What is the historical occasion that would give rise to the composition of this text or the creation of this text? And then things like who the author is or who the speaker is, what is their purpose or intention in speaking? Um, who do you think the audience is? And then there are various questions related to the audience. What is the content of the message, right? Can you summarize the main idea of the message? What is that main message that they are trying to send out? And what is the form in which it is conveyed? How is it structured? Is it oral, literary? Is it a video, audio, visual, multimodal, so on and so forth, right? You're not limited to just analyzing words on a page. You can do that for sure. That's not a problem. But I want to expand it so that you find something that is of interest to you, that's related to happiness, that you can kind of pick apart and figure out how and why that writer or that speaker used language in a particular way. What were their rhetorical strategies and how effective were they in presenting that to get the message out to a particular audience, right? So you're looking at all of these various things that come into play when you do a rhetorical analysis. How do form and content correspond? So if you are looking at a video, does it match the message or the content that's being conveyed, right? What effect could the form have? And does this aid or hinder the author's intention? So again, this week we will be looking, and I'll get into this in a minute, but we'll be looking at both a visual representation of a speech, an audiovisual representation of a speech, as well as the written words themselves, and they're kind of coming at it from different angles, so it's interesting. And then you'll get to compare and contrast and figure out whether or not one medium is more effective than the other. Does the message, speech, text succeed in fulfilling the author's or speaker's intentions? That is, was it effective as a rhetorical piece? And what does the nature of the communication reveal about the culture that produced it? What kinds of values or customs would the people have that would produce this? And how do the allusions, historical references, or kinds of words used place this in a certain time and location? And I think a great example of that is the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech from the 1960s. And he makes lots of allusions, lots of historical references. He pulls from the Declaration of Independence. He pulls from the Bible. He pulls from the Emancipation Proclamation. It's a speech that he delivered right there in front of the Lincoln Memorial, almost 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the Civil War, and it was for the purpose of civil rights, right? So, if you're curious about it, you can go and actually find that speech in YouTube and sit and listen to it and start to see the various things that come into play that make that such an effective speech, right? And that makes Martin Luther King such an effective orator or an effective speaker. So this is the basic questions for rhetorical analysis. I don't expect you to go through when you're doing an analysis to go question by question. These are just things that you can start to think about as you approach a text from a rhetorical perspective. Okay, what next? So for the content this week, we have a transcript from Matthew McConaughey's graduation speech that he delivered in 2016 at the University of Houston. It takes you to that. Of course, you see a picture of Matthew McConaughey, and it takes you through the whole speech. It's a lot of stuff to read, but it's important to see the differences in his original speech and then what you will be exposed to later. I have a transcript from a video that you will be watching that it kind of pulls apart excerpts from McConaughey's speech. And it's very interesting how that creator did this, took McConaughey's own word to send kind of a slightly different message, right? In a form of motivational video. So there's a transcript here from the video, which is taken as I said again, as excerpts from that original speech. And you will start to see the differences there where it doesn't completely line up to McConaughey's original speech. Then we have a website on Mihai I cannot say this person's name. I used to be able to, but I did not refresh my memory before I did this video. If you're curious, you can always put that person's name into not YouTube, into Google with pronunciation at the end, and you will find a video that tells you how to pronounce his name. It is Mihai Mihai, I think. And Mihai is a psychiatrist, involved in psychology and somehow, and he has this whole concept of flow. This is just kind of a summary of his overall approach to happiness, right? And that happiness isn't something that just simply happens, that we need to prepare and cultivate it by making choices and challenges, yada, 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 right? So it's kind of, he was a pioneer of positive psychology. So it's good to understand what he's talking about regarding flow. If you have a copy of the book, I don't expect that you would, but there is in the book an article. I did not assign the article because it is pretty lengthy and a little bit more academic than this web page that just kind of summarizes the ideas of this psychologist. So there's that. And then the next URL is on Abraham Maslow's psychology. So if any of you have taken Intro to Psychology, you have probably come across Maslow. And I think Maslow's psychology is really interesting as it relates to the idea of happiness, right? So we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that there is kind of this pyramid of personal growth and making sure that all of the needs, the lower needs, are met first before we can discover self-fulfillment and happiness, right? So read through that so you get a little bit of understanding of Maslow's approach in psychology, especially as it relates to happiness and self-actualization. I think is a really fascinating approach. And I know that it was something that really intrigued me as an undergraduate. So I thought I would add it here for you to be exposed to it if you never take a psychology class. At least you've been exposed to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I just think is really kind of interesting. So read through that. It's an interesting approach as we start to think more about what makes people happy and try to answer that question for ourselves. And then there are quite a few videos that I would like you to watch. The first is a rhetorical analysis project overview. I'm providing this here for you now so that you have several weeks where you can kind of start thinking about the project and plan ahead for that project. Much better to plan ahead than to come to week 6 and say, oh crap, I have this draft project due and I don't even know what I'm going to be doing it on, right? So this will give you an opportunity to become familiar with the requirements for the project, what we're trying to achieve in this project, figure out whether you want to write an essay or whether you'd like to do some kind of a presentation or a video, and then be able to plan out ahead so you're not overwhelmed towards the end of this first unit. So the draft is not due until week 6, but it's really a good idea to take that 19 minutes or so to sit through and understand my explanation and my goals for this project. And then we have the Matthew McConaughey. This is why you're not happy. It was not a video that was created by McConaughey himself. It is somebody who took McConaughey's speech, rearranged snippets of it, provided some visuals in the background, and kind of presents it as a motivational speech, right? So it's interesting to watch. Yeah, it's definitely a recommendation that you have the transcript from the video as well after you have read through McConaughey's original transcript. That way you're familiar with how he presents his ideas in the speech and how it's different in this video. There's also an 8-minute video on flow related to Mihai's positive psychology, how to be so happy that time stops. So that's an interesting one. It's short, 8 minutes or so. And then again, after you have or accompanying the reading from Maslow's psychology, we have this video, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what is happiness? And that's roughly 10 minutes long. So the assignments this week, you have a journal assignment and reading or video questions, and then a discussion board. The journal here is asking you to read through the script for his speech, or the transcript for McConaughey's speech, then watch the video following along with the transcript. And then I want you to think about the following questions as you compare and contrast the rhetorical strategies that are used in the original speech, as well as the video created from excerpts of the speech. So I want you to think about the audience of the original speech, the audience for the video. Who do you think they are, right? What rhetorical appeals does the speaker rely on to persuade the audience? Provide some quotes from the speech as example. And what strategies does the video creator use to persuade the audience? Provide some examples again. Think about how the visuals that are being presented might match up with McConaughey's words. I will give you a little example that this video creator kind of found video clips of McConaughey in his various acting roles as kind of the visuals between the words to maybe emphasize some of that message, right? So take a look at the video and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And then do you think one of these is more effective than the other at getting McConaughey's message across? Do you think the visual of snippets from the speech are more effective, or do you think going through and reading McConaughey's original speech is more effective at getting the message? It might also be helpful to review those basic questions for rhetorical analysis that I've provided. However, you don't have to go through and answer question by question. Just answer these questions here on this page, okay? Again, this is a very informal assignment. It does not have to be perfectly formatted, but you're more than welcome to use MLA format and just get into the habit of formatting things that way. This assignment will help you to think about the various elements that go into a rhetorical analysis. And again, keep in mind that it's different from the literary analysis that you may have had to do in high school, that you're analyzing the how and the why of a text and not simply the what. So that will be a file upload just because there are several things that you need to address, and it will probably be easiest to do that in a file. The next assignment are the reading and video questions. And primarily I'm doing these to make sure that you are engaging with the text. So I am asking a few questions about Mihai and flow. What's the basic idea of flow, to make sure that you understand his approach, especially as it pertains to positive psychology. Why is it important for good quality of life? And what does autotelic experience contribute to the happy life? Is happiness possible without such experiences? Again, you don't have to answer all of those questions, but just do the best to show that you are understanding the material that I'm assigning as reading and viewing each week. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Based on the reading and the video for the week, I'd like you to list Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how can meeting the lower needs help lead one to happiness? What do you think? Okay, again, that will be a file upload. And then we have this discussion board assignment. I really want to give you opportunities to interact with one another and kind of bounce ideas off a couple of you. So I have a couple of videos, again, that I'd like you to watch. The first is a music video. Happy by Pharrell Williams. I'm sure you're all familiar with that song. That's roughly 4 minutes long. And pay close attention to the various visuals that you see in the video. And I think if you put closed captioning on, you'll also get the lyrics pop up. If not, you can always Google the lyrics if you want to take a look at Pharrell's lyrics as well. This advertisement from Coca-Cola, Choose Happiness, the closed captioning, when I try it, either comes up in Portuguese or gibberish English. So the closed captioning is not as helpful, so you may have to listen and watch it a couple of times, but it's only a minute long. So take a look at that too. And then think about, again, the criteria based on the Canvas page. Discuss some of the elements from one or both of the videos that demonstrate the various rhetorical strategies that are used. You don't have to answer all of those questions. Again, they're just guidelines, just giving you things to think about, and consider things like audience, purpose, context, any kind of rhetorical appeals you might see, the form, the visuals, the use of repetition, that kind of thing. And then answer this question. Do you think the rhetorical strategies used in each video are effective in conveying the creator's messages? Why or why not? So this is a less formal assignment. You don't have to stress about being right or wrong. I just want you to think about things, give you an opportunity to bounce ideas off of one another and discuss those things, and just get you to work with the terminology that we use with rhetorical analysis, get you comfortable talking about things like audience and purpose and the rhetorical appeals, right? I want you to think a little bit more deeply about the media that we encounter frequently in our modern lives. And I'd like you to respond to at least one peer with thoughtful feedback by Wednesday, okay? All of these assignments are due by Sunday, the 28th, right? I will check on my calendar. Yes, Sunday the 28th. This says 11:49. That's a typo. I will fix that by 11:59 p.m. Again, if you need an extension and you don't already have an accommodation form that's on file that you have sent me, it's important that you communicate with me and say, hey, just a heads up, I had to work an extra shift this weekend or whatever, right? I don't really need to know the reason. Just say, hey, heads up, I'm going to be a little bit late. As long as you're communicating with me, you're making an effort, and that you will get to the assignment, that's all I need to know. But again, if you are chronically late with the assignments, then you might need to reevaluate and how you manage your time. Okay, so that is that for this week. If you have any questions about any of the information that's being presented here, any of the assignments, you need clarifications or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. That is why I'm here. Again, email is best, but if you are in a pinch for time and you only have my number and you want to text me to get a quick question out, that's fine. Okay, take care, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and I look forward to reading your responses to the material from this week. Bye-bye.